Our top stories for tonight. Jordan's Royal Air Force jets bombed Daesh positions in southern Syria and destroy ammunition depot, among other targets, in honor of Jordan's martyrs who fell in the fight against terror. His Majesty returns home from a work trip to the United States, where he met with the U.S. President and held a series of talks with administration and Congress leaders. And a U.S. judge blocks Trump's executive order allowing citizens from 7 Muslim countries banned from the United States to resume boarding U.S.-bound flights. Good evening and welcome to the News at 10. To honor the anniversary of the fall of Jordan's martyrs who lost their lives in the line of duty and in the fight against terror, Jordanian Royal Air Force jets bombed a number of Daesh positions in southern Syria. Among the targets hit in the operation launched last night was a military post seized by the terrorist group from the Syrian army. A military statement said Royal Air Force fighter jets destroyed ammunition depot, a warehouse used by Daesh to repair and booby trap machinery, as well as barracks used by the terrorists. The statement said drones and smart guided bombs were used in the attacks against what was described as the criminal thugs of Daesh. An unknown number of Daesh terrorists were killed and wounded in the operation, and a number of their vehicles and war machines were destroyed. The airstrikes are part of the kingdom's continued fight against terrorist groups, targeting them in their hideouts, according to the statement. The statement added, "Let those aggressors and outlaws reckon that settling scores shall continue until their demise." This footage was released by the Royal Air Force, showing the operation in progress.
كانت المهمة في سياق محاربة الإرهاب والدفاع عن سيادة حدود المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية. وقد قامت مجموعة من طائرات الF-16 السرب الأول المقاتل بمهاجمة مواقع للتنظيم الإرهابي. استهدفت طائراتنا مستودعات ذخيرة، حيث تمت المهمة مساء يوم الجمعة الموافق 3 من شباط 2017 لذكرى شهدائنا الذين قضوا في حربنا ضد الإرهاب. واستهدفت مستودعات لتعديل وتفخيخ الآليات. تم تدمير الأهداف باحترافية عالية، حيث يتطلب هذا النوع من المهمات الليلية تخطيطا واستطلاعا، وقد تم تنفيذ المهمة من قبل طياري سلاح الجو الملكي وبإشراف مباشر من القيادات العسكرية الأردنية. واستهدفت ثكنات أفراد عصابة داعش الإرهابية المجرمة مستخدمة قنابل موجهة ذكية، واستهدفت مستودعات لتخزين الوقود. كما شاركت في المهمة طائرات أردنية بدون طيار للتأكد من تدمير كافة المواقع المستهدفة بنجاح، حيث أسفرت العملية عن قتل وجرح العديد من عناصر التنظيم الإرهابي، إضافة إلى تدمير عدد من الآليات.
نقسم بكل ما قدم هذا الوطن من تضحية يا معاذ أن نخلص أبناءه من شرور الإرهاب فوق كل أرض وتحت كل سماء، محراب عز الأردن وعزنا.
His Majesty King Abdullah returned home after concluding a work trip to the United States, where he held a series of meetings with President Donald Trump, as well as senior administration and congressional leaders. In a meeting on the sidelines of the 2017 National Prayer Breakfast, His Majesty and Trump underlined the strategic Jordanian-U.S. partnership and the need for joint efforts to fight terrorism. They also discussed the situation in Syria and the stalled Palestinian-Israeli peace process. Separately, King Abdullah held talks with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence on Jordanian-U.S. partnership and Washington's role in achieving peace in the Middle East. In a series of meetings with leaders of the Senate and House committees, His Majesty outlined his vision vis-à-vis regional issues, warning against Israeli policies that obstruct peace efforts. He cautioned against the consequences of relocating the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, saying such a move would ignite fury among Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims and jeopardize a two-state solution. An alliance of U.S.-backed militias started a new phase of its campaign against Daesh in the city of Raqqa. Their aim is to complete their encirclement and sever the road to terrorist strongholds in Deir ez-Zor province. The action, according to the Syrian Democratic Forces statement, is carried out using airstrikes with backing from coalition special forces on the ground. Elsewhere, fighting raged between the Syrian army and Daesh northeast of Aleppo, where the Syrian forces are nearing the Daesh-held city of Al-Bab. The move risks a confrontation with Turkish forces that are fighting the group in the same area. Meanwhile, the Turkish military hit 59 Daesh targets and killed 51 terrorists in northern Syria as part of its ongoing incursion. In a written statement, the military said that of the 51 neutralized terrorists, 4 were so-called local commanders. Turkish jets destroyed 56 buildings and 3 command control centers in Al-Bab and Bzaga regions. Coalition forces also conducted 8 airstrikes in Al-Bab region, destroying 2 defense positions and 2 armed vehicles. The father of the Egyptian man who was shot outside the Louvre Museum in Paris said his son was not an Islamist, and the French were only accusing him of terrorism to excuse the brutality used to stop him. Abdullah Rida al-Hammami was shot several times after attacking soldiers outside the museum. Speaking in Cairo, the father said Abdullah works in the UAE and was on a business trip to Paris. Here's more.
Suspect in an attack at Paris's Louvre Museum has been identified as an Egyptian national who had only been in the country a matter of days. The city's prosecutor says the 29-year-old obtained a tourist visa in Dubai and landed in France on the 26th of January. Security forces in Cairo identified him as Abdullah Rida al-Hammami. Police have already raided the man's rented Paris apartment.
The investigations, which have just been initiated, are ongoing and will continue in France, but also outside France, in the name of cooperation on the international crime to determine the journey and also the motivations of the perpetrator and to find out whether he acted alone, spontaneously, or if he was following instructions.
French President François Hollande has described the incident as a terrorist attack. The assailant, wielding a machete in each hand, allegedly rushed at soldiers guarding the world-famous museum, yelling Allahu Akbar, God is greatest in Arabic. After striking one soldier on the head, he was shot by another. Hammami remains in a serious condition. Authorities say cans of spray paint were found in his backpack, but no explosives. France was already under a state of emergency after a spate of deadly attacks that have killed 230 people in the past 2 years. The thwarted attack clouding Paris's official bid later on Friday to host the 2024 Olympic Games. Questions about France's ability to host a safe and secure Olympics raised. With the country less than 3 months from a presidential election, security and fears of terrorism will be among the key issues.
An EU summit in Malta came to a close after a day of discussions dealing with ways to address the migrant crisis and discussions on the future of the European bloc. According to an agreed-on action plan, priorities will be given to training, equipping and supporting the Libyan National Coast Guard, disrupting the people smuggling business and supporting the development of local communities in Libya. It will also provide adequate reception capacities and conditions in Libya for migrants, as well as offer support to international organizations in stepping up assisted voluntary return activities. The central Mediterranean route is now the main gateway to Europe, with some 180,000 arrivals in Italy last year.
180,000 refugees were crossing the Mediterranean. After that We managed to bring down the number of refugees coming from Turkey to the Greek islands, minus 98%. This was something which had to be done.
We have agreed on immediate operational measures that should help reduce the number of irregular migrants and save lives at the same time. We will train, equip and support the Libyan Coast Guard to stop people smugglers and increase search and rescue operations.
In defiance of U.S. sanctions on its missile program, Iran today held a military exercise and said it would use its missiles if its security was under threat. Commander of the Revolutionary Guard's airspace, quoted by Tasnim news agency, said Iran's roaring missiles would fall on enemies' heads if Iran sees the smallest misstep. But despite the heated words, U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis said he was not considering raising the number of U.S. forces in the Middle East to address what he described as Iran's misbehavior, but warned that the world would not ignore Iranian activities. A statement on the Revolutionary Force website said Iran is holding the military exercise to test missile and radar systems and to showcase the power of Iran's revolution and dismiss the sanctions. Citizens of 7 predominantly Muslim countries banned from the United States by President Donald Trump can resume boarding U.S.-bound flights. This came after a Seattle judge blocked Trump's executive order. The judge, James Robart, made his ruling effective immediately yesterday, suggesting that travel restrictions could be lifted straight away. He is expected to issue a full written ruling over the weekend. The U.S. State Department said it has reversed the provisional revocation of visas in order to comply with the federal court ruling. The Department of Homeland Security also said it will comply with the ruling. But the White House said it planned to appeal as soon as possible. Trump took to Twitter denouncing the judge and vowing to overturn his ruling to block his executive order. In the wake of the ruling, Qatar Airways was the first to say it would allow passengers from Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria and Yemen to resume flying to U.S. cities if they had valid documents. Fellow Gulf carriers Etihad and Emirates said they would follow suit, as did Air France, Spain's Iberia and Germany's Lufthansa.
It's obviously a historic decision and an important one for the rule of law and for the people of the state of Washington and the people of our country. I said from the beginning, it is not the loudest voice that prevails in a courtroom. It's the Constitution. And that's what we heard from Judge Robart today. Not everybody may like this decision. I'm certain the President will not like this decision. But it is his job, it is his responsibility, it is his obligation as our President to honor it. And I'll make sure he does.
German weekly magazine Der Spiegel sparked controversy at home and abroad with a front cover illustration of Donald Trump beheading the Statue of Liberty. The cartoon figure of the U.S. president with a bloodied knife in one hand and the statue's head dripping in blood in the other carried the caption, "America First." The cover set off a debate on social media, with some describing it as tasteless. On the streets of Berlin, locals and tourists alike had mixed feelings about the provocative cover. While some found it too severe, others agreed that the American people made the wrong choice. Former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden said the only bipartisan thing left in American politics is cancer. He made the remarks during an address to the World Patient Safety, Science and Technology Summit in Dana Point, California, adding that one thing needed is hope. During the Obama administration, Biden launched a cancer moonshot initiative to speed up the development of new cancer drugs and diagnostics. The $1 billion project aimed to double the speed of cancer research over 5 years by increasing collaboration between government and industry, simplifying clinical trials, and fostering greater transparency in research.
I'm willing to bet that everyone in this room who's had cancer, who has had a loved one who has cancer, understands that feeling when the doctor says it's cancer. And the one thing is needed is hope. When President Kennedy described sending humankind to the moon, You could probably all recite parts of the speech. He talked about a commitment the nation was, quote, unwilling to postpone. They're my favorite words in that whole speech. We're doing this because the nation is unwilling to postpone. In our fight against cancer, we have to be unwilling to postpone.
Mexico's Colima volcano roared back to life during an eruption which sent a column of ash and smoke 4,000 meters above its crater. The explosion could be seen from several kilometers away and sent ash raining down in surrounding areas. Despite the powerful explosion, residents were not asked to evacuate. The 3,800-meter volcano has increased in activity since October, generating eruptive columns of heights ranging from 1,000 meters to 4,000 meters in height. The Colima volcano, also known as the fire volcano, is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Mexico has more than 3,000 volcanoes, but only 14 are considered active. United Healthcare rider Travis McCabe won Stage 3 of the Herald Sun Tour in Australia. McCabe was one of around 15 riders who avoided the crashes which held up the likes of Chris Froome and yellow jersey Damien Howson. In the final sprint, McCabe outran the Australian pairing of Lee Howard and Mitchell Docker. Team Sky's Froome faces a difficult task in the final stage tomorrow to retain his title and overhaul Howson. The Tour de France champion is currently 1 minute and 12 seconds behind his Orica Scott rival.
United Healthcare are going to take the stage. They are given much time. Here's the yellow jersey of Damien Howson.
China's Guangpu Chi and Australia's Lydia Lasila battled through heavy snowfall yesterday to claim victory in the aerials discipline of the Deer Valley FIS Freestyle Ski World Cup. Chi was especially dominant in the men's discipline, his score of 12.96 putting him more than 14 points ahead of his nearest challengers, Stanislaw Khladichenko and Stanislaw Nikitin. The second and third placed pair both finished on 114.60. The victory moved Chi back to the top of the overall leaderboard with 280 World Cup points ahead of Anton Kuchnir of Belarus, who sits on 20. In the women's event, Lasila's score of 95.52 edged American Kylie McKinnon into second place on 95.17. China's Meng Tao So rounded out the podium with 92.35.
Wow, Stanislaw, beautiful air. That's kind of that wow. Stewart coming in at 114.6 here. He's taking it.
And finally, the weather forecast. Low temperatures prevail in most regions for the rest of tonight with light variable winds. Frosty conditions affect the hilly areas, Badia, the Eastern Plains and the northern Jordan Valley in the late hours. Tomorrow, cold conditions continue in most regions, while it will be fair in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect relatively warm weather tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Before we conclude, here's a quick recap of our top stories. Jordan's Royal Air Force jets bomb Daesh positions in southern Syria and destroy ammunition depot, among other targets, in honor of Jordan's martyrs who fell in the fight against terror. His Majesty returns home from a world trip to the United States, where he met with the U.S. President and held a series of talks with administration and Congress leaders. And a U.S. judge blocks Trump's executive order allowing citizens from 7 Muslim countries banned from the United States to resume boarding U.S.-bound flights. With this, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Dana Abu Sham. Thanks for watching and have a good night.